Hello, welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'll be talking about why Charlie Chaplin is the greatest auteur of all time. For those of you who don't know, the word auteur means basically a director who has more creative control than the average director. Just being a director doesn't give you full control over a movie. You still have to deal with the writers, the producers, and the studios involved. However, auteurs have full creative control over their movies. Directors like Quentin Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, and Edgar Wright can all be considered auteurs because they also write and produce most of their movies. So now that we've established what an auteur is, how do we know that Charlie Chaplin is the greatest of all time at that? Well, first of all, we have to take into account the context of his films and when they took place. Charlie Chaplin began in film as early as anybody, moving from vaudeville to short films in 1914. He then made his first full-length film in 1921's The Kid. He then proceeded to dominate the 1920s with some of the most successful comedies of all time, highlighted by the Gold Rush. But his comedies weren't just comedies, they usually had commentary in them as well. In the 1920s and 30s, Chaplin was so popular and famous across the world that Adolf Hitler himself based his iconic mustache off of Chaplin's. Adolf Hitler was a huge fan of Chaplin, but Chaplin wasn't a fan of Hitler. Chaplin actually spoke out against Hitler and got in trouble for it. Yeah, he got rebuked for saying that Hitler wasn't such a great guy.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel.
But not only were his movies funny and had good commentary, they were also just great movies. If you go to his IMDb page, under director, he has 8 films with an 8-star or higher rating. By the way, that's out of the 11 films that he directed. So that's impressive, and he's obviously a good filmmaker, but what makes him the greatest auteur of all time? Like I mentioned previously, there's plenty of other directors that were auteurs as well, so why is he the best? Well, because I think he's the most auteur of all the auteurs. And what I mean by that is, I think he had more creative control than any other director ever. He directed these films, obviously, but he also produced them, he wrote them, he acted in them, did his own stunts in them, composed the music in them, and personally edited the film. In an era where you literally took scissors to film, cut and paste, he did it for every one of his movies. He personally composed the soundtrack to each one of his movies as well. Those songs he wrote and sometimes even personally sang in and played instruments in. He also acted in his movies, usually as the main character. Directors often make cameos in their own movies, but he was usually the main character. And he also did his own ridiculous stunts, including a tightrope at 30 feet without a net and being locked in a cage with a live lion. He didn't have any padding, there were no wires, that is a real lion, and he is in that cage with them. He created several of the greatest movies of all time with absolutely no help. He did everything himself, save for play the other characters, and sometimes he did that too. So you could argue that Charlie Chaplin isn't the greatest director of all time. That's a debate for a different day, but I think it's undeniable that he is simply the greatest auteur of all time. There's no comparison. Who else is there? There never was and never will be anybody like Charlie Chaplin. And that is why Charlie Chaplin is the greatest auteur of all time. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Simon from Simon's Rants, and that was my rant for today.